Okay, so maybe you have watched some of my previous videos, and something keeps coming back to my mind. And I think we are very used to reducing everything into concepts we already know. For example, imagine I talk to you about procrastination. Maybe I say procrastination isn't laziness, it's protection. Immediately, you will probably reduce that to something familiar like, okay, so he's talking about fear of failure, or maybe fear of success. But I don't even think it's that. At least for me, I think it's deeper. Because when you set a goal for yourself, when you create a vision for your future, you naturally imagine good things. And chances are you already have enough proof to believe that the goal is achievable. So it's not necessarily that you don't want it, and it's not necessarily that you're afraid of doing the work. But what if the fear is something else? What
Okay,
if you are afraid that you achieve the goal and it is not as good as you imagined? Or maybe you discover that the thing you have been building your identity around isn't as solid as you thought. And that possibility gives your mind an excuse to never fully commit. Now, again, you could reduce that to fear of success. But I think this is really about identity. Because imagine I tell you that your blue hair looks horrible. If you don't have blue hair, you won't care. You will dismiss it immediately. Why? Because it has nothing to do with who you are. But goals are different. The moment you set a meaningful goal, you start creating a future version of yourself. And the stakes stop being just the goal. Now the stakes are your identity. Because success changes it, failure changes it, and even uncertainty changes it. Any outcome has the potential to force you to rethink who you are. And that's scary, not because the outcome is good or bad, but because it threatens something your mind is trying very hard to keep stable, your sense of self. And as you probably already know, the ego doesn't really like change. You would rather stay somewhere familiar than move into something unknown, even if you consciously know that the unknown is better. So I think we don't spend enough time thinking about how attached we become to our goals. And I'm
okay,
not saying you shouldn't have goals. I'm not saying you shouldn't pursue ambitious things. I'm saying we should be careful about our attachment to them. And when people hear the word attachment,
okay,
things get very spiritual very quickly. But I don't mean it like that. For me, attachment is simply dependence. What depends on the outcome? Your emotional state, your self worth, your sense of identity. Because if those things depend on the result, then every action suddenly becomes emotionally loaded. And if you're anything like me, you are probably very analytical, very logical. And because of that, you might have learned to ignore your emotions. But if you think about it, that's not actually logical because we are human beings and we have emotions for a reason. Every part of us serves a function. So it doesn't make sense to ignore them completely. And this is where I think emotions become more useful than explanations because explanations are easy. We can always come up with a story, we can always find a concept, we can always label something. But emotions happen before the explanation. If I tell you maybe you are procrastinating because you are afraid of what success or failure would do to your self image, and something immediately reacts inside you, you need to pay attention to that. I'm not
okay,
talking about thinking about it for 10 minutes and deciding whether you agree. I'm talking about that instant reaction that you have, that trigger, that discomfort, that resistance. Because I think those reactions often contain more truth than the explanations we create afterward. So, what is it all of this for? I think it's a way to get closer to what's actually happening. Not the reductionist version, not the label, not the concept, the real thing underneath. And maybe instead of immediately explaining away every feeling, we should listen to it first. This is something I'm working on myself. And honestly, it's very hard because my default mode is just do the work, the results are what matter, and ignore everything else. But at some point, you can ignore the fact that you are a human being. And sometimes your emotions are affecting your behavior far more than your biases, your logic, or your rationalizations. So yeah, this is a bit of a ramble, but maybe that's the point. Maybe the purpose of this video isn't to tell you exactly what to think. Maybe it's to trigger something. Maybe it's to make you notice your reaction to certain ideas. And if something in this video triggered you, maybe that's where you should start looking. So anyway, I hope this helps you or someone. And if it helps even one person, and I hope that's you, that's more than enough for me. So thank you for listening again. Bye bye. Okay, 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 okay.